Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Members of the Association of Oldest Inhabitants and your guests. We're happy to have guests here. Actually, we do like to recognize our guests. Do we have any guests who are willing to stand up and be counted here today? If so, stand up and wave and tell us who you are and whose guest you are. Well, guests or not, I'm very pleased to let you know that this is the largest turnout since we moved to full-time in-person meetings. As you know, with the end of last spring's season, the board voted to discontinue Zoom. So those of you who are here today were willing to put a little something extra into it to make the physical journey down here to the lovely environs of the Women's National Democratic Club. And again, a shout out to our hosts here in this beautiful facility. We were so fortunate to have been offered this wonderful building as a meeting place after we were moved from the Capitol skyline. Anyhow, enough of that. I have one announcement I would like to make before we get into our program. The Military Road School Preservation Trust is presenting the 98th anniversary of Lincoln Thomas Day. It's a historic day sponsored by the National Federation of Colored Women's Clubs of America in 1924, initially, to honor President Lincoln, obviously, and Mrs. Elizabeth Thomas, who was known as the property owner of Fort Stevens. And if anyone has anything to add to that to enlighten me further, shout out and let us know. Anyone want to? That's still pretty sketchy. In any event, Lincoln Thomas Day will be this coming Saturday. Up, speak.
Yes, you're all invited to this particular day. It's a day lost in history. And Mrs. Thomas owned the property down on Fort Stevens. And it was taken away from her to enlarge Fort Massachusetts during the Civil War era. It's thought that Thank you. It was taken from Mrs. Thomas when it was thought that the Confederates would be coming from the north down 7th Street Pike towards Brightwood. And that was where Fort Massachusetts was. And to enlarge that, so they decided to enlarge that fort a couple of years before because they wanted to be prepared and ready should that happen. And it did. But they had to take Mrs. Thomas's property away from her. And there were German soldiers who came. She didn't speak German, and they didn't speak English. So they lifted her up, took her and her things, and set it aside in another area. And they had white doors on the site to exemplify where her house was, and they used that as a magazine section for the fort. So what we do is the Federation of National Association of Colored Women's Clubs in 1924 wanted to honor two people of the Civil War era that they felt, were very important. So they honored her and President Lincoln. He promised to compensate her, and he got a bill passed in Congress for $10,000. But the Congress never gave it to her. And the bill went through two more, and then he was assassinated. The bill went through two more times, and it got down to $2,000. And we can't really find out who got the money. But Mrs. Thomas didn't. So that's why we commemorate this day. And we want you all to come. It's only 2 hours from 12 to 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that is Saturday, September 17th from noon to 2, and it's the 13th and Quackenpost Streets, renamed Elizabeth P. Thomas Way in Washington, D.C. So we hope you will come. I would like to ask next for either a reading of the minutes or a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes. I have a motion on the floor to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a second? Okay, that we can call the question. All in favor, then, okay, we will dispense with the reading of the minutes. Next, I'd like to have a combination of treasurer and treasurer's report and report by the treasurer on new members or changes in membership.
Well, good afternoon. So we have roughly 3,200 in our checking account, and we're about 2/3 of the way. Can you hear me?
Better.
2/3 of the way through the year. So at the beginning of the year, after a 2-year hiatus, we kind of had to pull some projections and numbers about how many people would. Well, we shouldn't we? But we still have bills to pay. But I'm just happy to say that because of the renewals and the donations of the members, that we are still, we're on target. And thank you for your trust in us that we would keep this going. And that's all for the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Carolyn.
We have some new members. There were actually a couple of members that joined. Frank Leone, and his wife, Denise Diane Vogt, joined, and I think I only announced her membership. So she wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Frank also is a new member, and he is the co-chair of the Foggy Bottom Association's History Project and a longtime resident of D.C. So I told them I'd make sure that we welcomed him. And as far as new members, we have Richard Bush, who's retired. He heard about AOI from Catherine Eccles and Charles Robertson III. Anne Celine, Anne Celine, she is reinstating a previous membership. Richard Best Jr., who actually joined earlier and somehow in the spring, and we missed it. Retired civil servant, heard about through Nelson. And finally, Regina M. Berry, who joined all the way from Delaware. And she's an architect and a descendant of Corporal or Captain William Hearn, John Hearn, and John Jeffers. Bill, do those names ring a bell to you?
Yes, Bill Brown. No, sorry.
Okay. Well, she said that when she was 11 years old, she faked her age so that she could get into the archives and do her history, family history. And then when that worked, the next year when she was 12, she snuck into the Library of Congress. So, so welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Carolyn. Now, another item of business that I will mention at this point is that now that we are returning to whatever the new normal is, the association will be conducting elections at the November meeting. I don't have my notes with me. Bill? November? And the board of directors has asked, and they have graciously consented, in accordance with our bylaws, a nominating committee to receive nominations for officers and for vacancies on the board of directors, and we'll propose these in November.
It'll be in the November newsletter.
The November newsletter.
But the nominating committee, all those members are here present today if you want to introduce them.
Except I don't have their names.
Would you like me to help?
Yes.
Chairing the committee is J.R. Walter Springman.
Walter Springman is the chair.
Winfield Swanson here, she's sitting at the table.
Winfield Swanson is a member of the nominating committee.
And Judy Hubbard's here someplace.
And Judy Hubbard,
Hubbard's in the back.
who is in the back waving her hand.
So I'll speak for Tom. If membership skills that would like to help out Carolyn with the membership, that might give you a little boost in terms of getting on the ballot or something.
And
The nominees would be in the November newsletter and will be voted upon. You have to be in person. There are no proxies. There's no voting by mail for those members present at the November luncheon.
thank you, Bill. And just as to set off the mad scramble, I will not be running for an additional term. When I was persuaded to accept the nomination in 2019, I assumed I'd have smooth sailing down a broad and placid river. Well, as it was more like negotiating the rapids of the Colorado in the Grand Canyon, and not just for me, but for this association, which survived and thrived and has been given an infusion of new life, new membership, and a lot of vigor. So I think, and certainly not my work alone, I've been helped along the way by people whose names you all know. But so I think 3 years, 3 terms is enough. No fourth term. I guess that was FDR, that was no third term, but no fourth term. So you will have a chance to vote for a new president and other officers at that time. Now, I think we can proceed to our topic for today. What about Pennsylvania Avenue? Is that our problem child here in the District of Columbia? I remember reading when it was first laid out, it's entirely too broad between the Capitol and the White House, the President's house. I've seen lithographs showing, I gather it was Thomas Jefferson who parked, as they call it, which is what parking was originally, by the way, was not parking for automobiles, but it was parking for putting in parks. And there was an enormous green sward down the middle of what is now Pennsylvania Avenue, planted, I believe, with Lombardy poplars by Thomas Jefferson, which are cheap and grow fast. They don't last very long, but, this is a republic, not a monarchy. And then also, I think all of us will remember photos, and more than a few of us here will remember the period in the 20th century, 19th and 20th centuries, when first horse-drawn and later electrical streetcars ran up the middle and down the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue between the Capitol and roughly the White House. And people would go out into the middle of the street and stand on a little wooden box when the streetcar came by, which was always struck me as an interesting way of doing things. So it's always been evolving. And of course, those of us who are fans of Boss Shepherd will recall that until Boss Shepherd commissioned the great Cloaca Maxima, this great sewer under the intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution Avenue, there were regular floods. And even some of the early presidents of the United States were called out from the White House to help rescue people and rigs that were stalled down at about the intersection of Pennsylvania and Constitution. So it's an interesting. It's been an long and interesting trip, and there have been many big plans to improve Pennsylvania Avenue. And we were talking earlier about the one that would have eliminated the entire city block where the Willard Hotel and the Washington Hotel are now for an enormous, sun-baked in the summer and wind-swept in the winter National Square that fortunately we never came to be. And the Pennsylvania Avenue Development Plan, much of which has been recognized. But today we are going to hear from staff from the National Capital Planning Commission, who will be talking to us about the new alternatives that have been proposed for the future of Pennsylvania Avenue as one of the centerpieces in our environment. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention historically was that the intended sight line between the White House and the Capitol, as I think most everyone here knows, was forever altered and eliminated when Andrew Jackson, in a fit of pique, walked out of the White House and crossed the lawn to the site of the current Treasury building, and they were discussing where to put the new Treasury building. He said, "Put it here so that way I don't have to look at the damn Congress." And in any event, so we have this. We have a new offering, and today we are going to have two staff members from the National Capital Planning Commission, Karin Schierhold and Jeff Jamawat, who will be talking to us about the options that are presented. And Karin is an urban planner with the National Capital Planning Commission, and her work supports the Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative. And before joining the NCPC, she worked as an architect and publication editor with the National Building Museum frequently. She has researched water infrastructure and public space for a Fulbright Fellowship in Mumbai, India. She has a Bachelor of Architecture from Penn State and a Master of Architecture in Urban Design from Harvard. And Jeff is an urban planner also with NCPC in their planning division, the physical planning division, and this operates as an urban design studio for the federal government. And he brings experience in economic development and commercial real estate from two business improvement districts that I think you may be aware of, the Golden Triangle, CBD, and the Capitol Riverfront. Previously, Jeff was a program director at the Mayor's, that's Mayor's apostrophe, so it's multiple mayors, Institute on City Design, and which is a technical assistance program of the National Endowment for the Arts and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And he holds 2 MIT degrees in real estate development and city planning with a focus on urban design. And I'd like to ask you to give a warm welcome to Jeff and Karin today as they enlighten us on what we may expect. And they will be happy to accept what I'm sure will be your questions afterwards. Please come on.
Can you all hear me? Great. So good afternoon. I'm going to flip. Okay. This works. This is good. I will note that this is our first in-person briefing in quite a long time, so a little bit of jitters. We're used to the Zoom interface, so we'll do our best. So good afternoon. My name is Karin Schierhold. I'm an urban planner with the National Capital Planning Commission. And I'm here today with Jeff, and we're going to introduce the Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative and share a proposed new vision for the Avenue with not just one idea, but 3 concepts that aim to achieve this new vision. Our executive director, Marcela Costa, is very excited you asked us to present, and we really thank you for the opportunity today. So our presentation is about 20 minutes. I'll start with a little background on the initiative and introduce the vision, and Jeff will lead us on a quick tour of the concepts, and I'll wrap up with next steps. And I'm sure you all probably have a much finer insight into the planning history of the Avenue, but we all know it was laid out in the L'Enfant Plan to serve as the People's Promenade. President Washington considered Pennsylvania Avenue to be one of the capital city's most important features. It was envisioned as the city's principal artery and center of civic activity, with 3 distinct plazas punctuating important locations. And over time, it became an important civic space representative of a democracy belonging to all Americans. So the Avenue has cycled through renewal and decline, as you just heard, for over 2 centuries, reinventing itself really to meet the needs of each era. It's shifted from a bustling commercial corridor to primarily an office district and workplace, and at times a car-dominated landscape. So the Avenue's last renewal started in the 70s when Congress created and charged the Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation, the PADC, with properly developing, using, programming, and maintaining the Avenue in line with its symbolic and civic role in the national capital. This is the 74 plan that guided that redevelopment. You can see a lot of what is actually out there today. It is still the guiding plan. It's almost half a century old, and it is well past due for an update. Congress dissolved the PADC in 1996 and delegated its responsibilities to federal and district agencies. Each has a different stewardship role over the street. We are one of those agencies. So the agencies at the bottom of the slide, along with key stakeholders, formed an executive committee in 2015 and launched the Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative that we're here to talk to you about today. They agree that a new vision is needed to revive the avenue and position it as an asset that can contribute to the district's economic health. So our area of focus is outlined in orange. It's the 1.2-mile corridor between the White House and the Capitol, which also includes about 40 acres of adjoining public space. So, as I'm sure you know, the avenue today is a problem child. It suffers from aging infrastructure and declining physical conditions. Prior to the pandemic, its office market really struggled to compete with all the emerging neighborhoods throughout the city. The closure of streets around the White House changed the street's function. It's no longer a crosstown thoroughfare, leaving the roadway and the sidewalks feeling empty. These conditions affect the daily experience of the street and really undervalue the avenue as an important city asset. Yet the avenue has an enduring role as the nation's most important symbol of democracy. It really comes to life when it hosts social, cultural, political moments and events. It's held us as we've mourned and protested inequalities, witnessed the tug and pull of democracy, and rejoiced in some of our most important achievements. Prior to the pandemic, the Avenue hosted about 150 local and regional events each year. So as a stage, the Avenue setting is really unsurpassed. It has a very unique location. The use mix around it is very conducive for events. It has low traffic volumes, great access to transit, and really that proximity, the downtown businesses and the nearby cultural uses benefit from the visitor traffic that these types of events generate. So as a basis for our work, the executive committee completed several studies, including a pedestrian life study, transportation, urban design, and market analysis, and a cultural landscape report. So I'll highlight some of the key findings from those reports. These are all also on our project page if you are interested in reading more. The transportation study confirmed that closures of East Street and Pennsylvania Avenue at the White House essentially severed that east-west vehicular traffic. That reduction in use meant that we have about 20 feet of roadway available for other uses while maintaining an acceptable level of service and traffic flow. It also revealed that the avenue is a heavily used transit and bike corridor. It's an area that brings in a lot of commuters from across the region with up to 80 buses an hour and nearly 2,000 bicycle trips on an average weekday. The urban design analysis looked at the avenue's planning history, land use, mobility and access, urban form, infrastructure, and character. It found the avenue's built form conveys a strong civic identity, but the scale of the buildings and the blocks can be overwhelming. And there's a lack of ground floor activity that really isn't very engaging for pedestrians. So with the land use mix mainly commercial to the north and different federal to the south, the different development patterns on either side of the street, it's essentially a dividing line between private development and the cultural uses. We did, the Park Service did a cultural landscape report that noted the avenue's strong civic and symbolic roles have really endured since its inception. And on the ground, the avenue's exceptional scale and cohesive streetscape contribute to its character. We did a market study with HRNA, really confirming that the avenue's competitiveness is affected by these emerging neighborhoods, different demands for office space now, and a limited retail market. And this was pre-pandemic. It's since gotten worse with this new hybrid situation we're in. And we'd also like to note that in 2020, the district commissioned a report by the Urban Land Institute. That report examined how the district could recover from start to recover from the impacts of the pandemic and really stress the importance of using public space, placemaking, design, and civic infrastructure to revitalize downtown, which is very consistent with the initiative's goals. So, federal and local stakeholders agree on a new vision, that the Avenue should be a beautiful street designed for people first, and that its highest and best use is a venue elevated as America's stage for nationally significant events, a place to celebrate and showcase the best of American culture, art, and entertainment. The street also needs to be a better street for daily life, prioritizing pedestrians, bikes, transit, and cars, with more comfortable and engaging public spaces for people to enjoy every day, all day, and into the evening. So NCPC has prepared 3 concepts. They're really high-level ideas. They explore different ways to realign the circulation, reconfigure public space, and offer different options to balance daily use of the street with event programming. So we have 3 distinct themes that propose some modest and some ambitious ideas for consideration, and I will note that these are ideas. We put them out there to start a conversation, to see what resonates. And throughout this presentation, we'll use a consistent order and color coding, so it'll be easy to compare and contrast. So we have Urban Capitol Street. This is a downtown destination with expansive sidewalks, comfort amenities, and services. Linear Green in the center proposes a car-free urban linear park that prioritizes transit, people, and bikes. And Civic Stage proposes a large promenade with capitol views and flexible spaces for daily activity and special events. And I will note that these are not necessarily standalone ideas. Ultimately, components of each will mix and match to best serve the needs of the Avenue. So L'Enfant's plan for the Avenue included a sequence of prominent public spaces linked by that cohesive streetscape. So these spaces are where blocks of buildings frame what we call outdoor urban rooms, shown here in blue. Each concept treats the corridor and these urban rooms a bit differently, so we'll look at the corridor first. Okay. So these cross sections compare how each concept uses that extra 20 feet I mentioned, rethinking how we can accommodate pedestrians, bikes, transit, and cars. The top illustration is today's condition. You see lots of space for vehicles in that center running bike lane. The bottom left, Urban Capitol, is very similar to the existing condition. It takes the surplus roadway and expands the sidewalks a bit towards the center, giving more room for pedestrians, maintaining some dedicated lanes for cars, transit, and bikes. In the center, the linear green concept is a bit more ambitious. It's car-free with transit and rideshare, but it uses that surplus roadway to transform the sidewalk area really into a curbless pedestrian park, again with transit and bike lanes running in the center. And on the right, Civic Stage uses the surplus to create a central promenade running the length of the avenue with bike and travel lanes on each side. So this shows those configurations at a bird's eye level along the corridor. So again, on the left, those expanded sidewalks in Urban Capitol provide room for unique and varied pedestrian spaces, places for activity, and maybe mobile commerce. In the center, linear green, the pedestrian paths weave through the linear park landscape, creating informal areas for seating and maybe recreation. And then finally, on the right, Civic Stage creates that new pedestrian space in the center where people can enjoy a grand promenade with Capitol views that extends the length of the avenue. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff now for a quick tour of the urban rooms.
Right, thank you, Karin, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take you on the tour of the 3 major public spaces along the avenue. For each concept, we look at the changes to traffic circulation and how the public space can be reconfigured for daily use and special events. We completely understand that rerouting the traffic will have an impact on the current circulation. And part of this work moving forward is that we are going to conduct a detailed traffic analysis to help us understand how the extent of the impact on the neighborhood. So let's start with the western end at Freedom Plaza. Just for orientation, we are looking east from 15th Street with the US Capitol in the background. So urban capital concept will reconnect the historic alignment of Pennsylvania Avenue through Freedom Plaza. Under this concept, travel and bike lanes will run through the space and the street will be curbless. This configuration will create 2 new open spaces shaped like a bow tie in front of the National Theater and the Wilson Building. Again, looking at the same perspective from 15th Street, as Karin mentioned, linear green is a car-free concept, and there is no travel lane on Pennsylvania Avenue. Under this concept, there will be a dedicated transit, Uber rideshare, and bike lane in front of the Department of Commerce and the Wilson Building. And there's a big park in front of the National Theater that will begin the landscape sequence that continue along the avenue to the US Capitol Building. For Civic Stage, it proposes a travel lane in front of the Bullard Hotel and National Theater, and the transit and bike lane will be moved to in front of the Department of Commerce and Wilson Building. Under this concept, there's going to be a new plaza in front of City Hall with the central promenade that Karin mentioned, all the way to the US Capitol Building. And here is a slightly different perspective. Now we are looking south from 12th Street. You can see that the street realignment allows more flexibility in public space configuration. This is an example of the multi-day International Flower Festival, showing how we can transform Pennsylvania Avenue and the adjacent area into event space by expanding the programmatic elements between the buildings and along the avenue. The rendering on the top right shows a new City Hall Plaza in front of Wilson Building. Now moving east to Market Square, and you know that it's located at the center of the avenue. So we are now on 9th Street looking at the US Capitol Building. Urban Capital concept will add a simple mid-block pedestrian crossing in front of Market Square and National Archive, and this will enhance the walkability for the pedestrian. As a car-free option, Linear Green will close off this block altogether and reroute the transit around it. This concept will create a permanent open space in front of Market Square and National Archive. However, the park would still allow the motorcade and emergency vehicle access. The Civic Stage option will join the central promenade with the mid-block pedestrian crossing, creating a big central square in front of the archive. And again, showing a different perspective to understand how Market Square can interface with A Street. Closing the block and the street during large festival or event can create one cohesive space and a unique backdrop from the Portrait Museum to National Archive and the US Capitol. The image on the bottom left is the outdoor dining event with the beautiful US Capitol in the background. Moving along to the eastern end, where Pennsylvania Avenue, Constitution, and 4th Street intersect. As you know, this is the location where most of the large events take place today. So taking a closer look at traffic circulation, Urban Capital keep the existing intersection alignment and add a generous pedestrian crossing on 4th Street. This will improve walkability and enhance the connection between the mall and downtown. Urban Capital also imagine a park-like setting with lots of shaded sitting area. The new plaza in front of the National Gallery will extend to the street, balancing the activity on both sides of the avenue. Okay. So Linear Green will straighten out the intersection on Constitution Avenue by the Andrew Mellon Fountain to simplify the traffic circulation. Because right now you have, when you go on Constitution, you have to make a right and then make a left. So this will straighten out that avenue. It will also provide an active park space in front of the gallery east and west buildings. And last but not least, Civic Stage will go big and propose a tunnel on Constitution Avenue in addition to closing 4th Street. So this will create several plazas for outdoor programming, events, and exhibit. Under this concept, the seating area in front of Johns Hopkins, the former museum building, can extend activity to the avenue. And during festival and special events, the sidewalk can extend to the center promenade, creating flexible space that can transform a range of programmatic elements. And for larger events, the intersection at Constitution and Pennsylvania that Tom talked about in his opening can combine with closure of 4th Street to increase usable area and create a main stage that could extend activities along the street and the surrounding public spaces. Now, the project area that Karin described earlier only focused on the area west of 3rd Street, but we recognize that Pennsylvania Avenue also extends to the Capitol ground and now terminate on the surface parking lot. So we did more homework and showing Urban Capital, how Urban Capital would treat this area. The concept would replace the angle parking in the center with a landscape median while keeping some curbside parking to create a more welcoming entry to the US Capitol. For linear green as a car-free concept would remove all the surface parking to create a garden gateway with a high-performance landscape in front of the US Capitol. And Civic Stage keeps some of the parking along the curbs and extend the central promenade all the way to the Peace Monument, creating a more ceremonial entrance to the Capitol ground. And on the left, you can see the ramp to the tunnel. Now, while the public spaces provide area for both large and small events, they can also be stitched together with the corridor to create a mile-long venue. Under Civic Stage, the central promenade has close to 70 feet of clear space. That's enough room to accommodate engaging public art installation and other activities. The entire avenue can host a longer-term special event like the Folklife Festival, where event structure and activities are focused in the middle, maintaining some traffic flow during the events. This will help balance special event activities with neighborhood considerations. And with that, I will hand it back to Karin, who will lay out what's next for the initiative.
So, thank you, Jeff. So yes, how do we move forward from here and what is next? As I said, these were big ideas meant to inspire a conversation. These are not concrete plans, imminent plans. We are really thinking about redevelopment strategies for the Avenue as civic investments that can drive economic revitalization. It's much like investing in a new waterfront destination or convention center. So to do this, we'll need a new plan, update that 74 plan, finally, and use that as a roadmap to guide future improvements. That will include a public space and infrastructure plan and an implementation program. And so we know this new plan will take time, money, and political will. There are some things we can start to do now. We are in early conversations with district and federal partners about unique programming opportunities to improve daily use and demonstrate the Avenue's potential to host some creative, cultural, and civic events. This will inform different ways we could reconfigure the public space, the roadway, both for daily use and also this event-related activity. We also, in the midterm, want to improve infrastructure like telecom, power, water, and security to help manage First Amendment activities. That's something that the Avenue does all the time and does it well, and really support the types of events and just the experience that we want people to have on the Avenue. And then that long-term goal is to improve the parks and public spaces to make them more usable and flexible. So we released this vision and the concepts in March. Over the last 6 months, we've had a little bit of media coverage. We've completed over 65 briefings and events. Like I said, this is our one and only in-person briefing. We've talked to stakeholders and the general public, and overall the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. There is support to move these ideas forward. We have secured funding to start the next phase of planning work in 2023, and we anticipate it will take about 3 to 4 years to develop that physical plan and an implementation plan. It will then need to be funded and implemented. So what that means is that in the next year, we'll likely issue an RFP, work with a robust consultant team, take all the feedback, all the response to this, reach out again to our stakeholders, and really refine and synthesize these ideas into one concept that will move forward. And that then we can get a cost estimate on what permanent improvements may cost, and so it will be probably a decade of work to come. But we are very excited to see this progress. As I'm sure you know, it's been a long time coming. And that concludes our briefing. I want to thank you all again for your time and attention today, and now we'd really love to hear from you.
Two things come to mind. One, the Capitol grounds, you have to get the Capitol's buy-in. And parking spaces for Congress is, the Capitol grounds, Congress decides what's going to happen to those grounds. And parking space is very, very competitive. So to take away parking spaces, you're going to have to have a human sacrifice to do it.
Yes, we are aware this has been a very delicate conversation we've had with the architect of the Capitol. Their staff is a good partner. We know that it's not up to their staff. Great advantage is our former project manager for this work is now working at the architect of the Capitol. But that is why our study area officially ends on 3rd Street. And those extra renderings we did, that's purely aspirational at this point. It's the elephant in the room, and hopefully we'll come to a resolution.
And the other thing that comes to mind is every 4 years we have a parade for the new president. Mm-hmm. Some of those, I'm not quite sure how the parade would work.
Right. That's an excellent point. And we have been we briefed Military District of Washington. There was a mixed reaction. These concepts, each one of them has some pros and cons. It will accommodate some of these large-scale events. Some will be easier, some will be a bit more of a challenge. We likely aren't going to turn the Avenue into an urban linear park. We did maintain the clearance necessary for the inaugural parade. That was very important to do in these even purely schematic concepts. So we know we have the width clearance. We're aware of some other issues like grade changes and things like that. As the concepts move forward, they will be a very important stakeholder because that parade is timeless and regular, and one thing that really is a signature event for the Avenue.
One of the things that comes to mind is
I'm Gary Scott, and one thing that all your alternatives do not sort of address are all of those of us who spent 30 or more years driving our cars through downtown Washington, going through the traffic, trying to get back and forth to work, and then going to our homes. I mean, it doesn't have much to say to the commuters who use the Avenue all the time. And it seems to be more tilted toward tourists and people that put on festivals in the weekends. And what about the people that work here?
Those are very important considerations. I think as we start to understand what the new culture of work is, we'll get a better sense of what the traffic volumes will be on the avenue. We are updating all of our traffic studies. Again, in 2018, the traffic study revealed that the avenue is a little too large for the volume of cars on it. And with the new hybrid work, with federal offices, federal headquarters consolidating, we don't know where that will go. We're actually working with Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments to do a workplace study. One of our other divisions is leading that effort as it relates to transit in the region, to kind of understand, we don't want to exclude car commuters. We don't want to exclude people who need car access to this space. But we do want to right size, adjust the road a bit so it's a bit more pedestrian friendly and it doesn't feel so empty. A lot of times you don't see a lot of cars on the avenue unless there's a street closure, you know, uptown a bit. So we will be doing that. That'll be an important part as the work moves forward, to really understand the transit impacts and kind of what this new work scenario is. We know that we work off the avenue. We're right in front of we're right across the street from the FBI building. So it's coming back to the office. So many places have shut down. We're just like in flux right now. So I think that moving forward, we'll be doing a lot of studies and get more insight into how to accommodate. And
I will add to that. So we met with the Metro. We briefed the Metro. We briefed the Cork Regional Planning Agency. So we briefed their technical committee, their Access for All committee, and we are presenting in front of the TPB in October. So these are the conversations that's happening, and it's not a one-time thing. So we will go back to them time and again as the project move forward. So I am going to go this way, and I'm going to go to this gentleman.
It appears that you're trying to eliminate motorized traffic from the avenue. I'm a native Washingtonian, so I recall the streetcars and so on. Have you thought about doing the same thing they've done on H Street and running a streetcar up and down, so at least somebody that can't walk could ride the streetcar and enjoy the view back and forth? Number one. Number two, have you given any consideration at all to the businesses, because they rely on deliveries, daily deliveries, and there's a lot of times those trucks are parked temporarily to deliver to bars and restaurants or office buildings.
Yes.
And by the way, I vote against eliminating the motorized traffic. You should have a combination of the two.
Yes, agree. And even the linear green option, we maintain the transit, the bus lines. We know that it's a very, very important bus corridor for the district. I'm not sure if we'll go back to a streetcar. In all likelihood, although linear green was exceptionally popular with the public, it is probably the least realistic in terms of implementation. And like you said, the good point about access, and people need cars, and people need cars on this street, and we respect that. I think what we want to do, again, is to figure out the amount of room the cars need and make sure that transit is maintained, all those transit connections, and then really figure out how we can make it a better space for pedestrians as well, so you don't feel like you're walking down an empty road. In terms of access, we have met with property owners in most of the buildings along the north. GSA is our partner, so that covers the federal triangle. We understand their access concerns, and that will also be something that's worked into future transportation studies.
And in terms of talking to the business community, we are working very close with the downtown DC bid. So they are our partner in this project. Any more questions from this table? Okay.
The urban design appears to meet the complete streets requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, urban capital is really a signature complete street. It has dedicated transit, bike, and vehicular lanes. The other two, again, linear green really pushes the envelope. It's it's been an interesting conversation. People seem to really resonate with that, but it could just be that they want to have more green space in the city. And I know that the National Mall is right there, but this would be more of a complement to the mall. But yes, anything that moves forward, again, we'll hire this consultant, refine and synthesize. It will be one concept that moves forward through all the regulatory process, and that will likely be true to the complete street principles.
If you can say your name before you ask the question, so the room knows.
Sure. Bill Rice. Are you familiar with the Shalom Barana's comment on the FBI building?
No, not. I have to say, Shalom.
You're not?
No, our agency did do work on the square guidelines.
You're not familiar with his article in the Business Journal arguing that it should not be demolished in the name of the environment?
I've heard that argument before. I haven't read that.
What is your
specific
reaction
article.
to it?
As an architect, I understand the incredible amount of resources it takes to demolish a building, especially a brutalist concrete structure like the FBI. As an NCPC staff member, I don't know if I want to be in the office with a window that faces the FBI during that demolition. I do appreciate that it is a barrier, physically, visually. It's a very polarizing topic, and I think that I can see the sustainability argument. I can see the disruption argument of, not just repurposing it, but eliminating it. Then again, you have D Street that cuts off. It is a visual barrier. It has outlived its use. It no longer functions for the FBI. In terms of our involvement, when the discussions were that the FBI was moving, NCPC, because of our role in the PADC, we were charged with basically crafting the square guidelines for the parcels that the FBI sits on. Our agency completed that prior to the last administration and those plans falling through. We honestly don't know much more than what is in the media right now about the future of the FBI, but we have heard those arguments, and it's a lot to consider.
Would you consider sending it, discussing it at the board level?
The board of commission level, yes. Anything that does happen to that site will come through our commission.
And that concept will be discussed?
Oh, absolutely, yes. They can't do anything to that site without it coming through us and through CFA, the Commission of Fine Arts. So, well.
With this table, any question? All right. This table? Again, please say your name.
My name is Andrea Seeger. A couple of quick things about the Freedom Plaza map that seems to disappear from the plans, and I'm just curious to know if that would be dismantled and moved elsewhere. And are you going to have dedicated bus lanes like they do in other very transit-oriented cities?
Yes, I'll do the bus lanes first. So Urban Capital, that's one of the signatures of that concept, a dedicated bus lane. We understand it's really a bus corridor that connects deep southeast with upper northwest, so incredibly important to the district. We also have a bunch of regional buses, so that will absolutely be included. In terms of Freedom Plaza, the plaza, while the avenue is a historic site, the plaza is not yet old enough to be historically protected. So it's not individually listed. So we're not, I think what we were showing was really kind of exploring the circulation around and through it. Different ways to get around that space. It's a bit not very intuitive for people unless you're very familiar with the area. It's also raised right now, which presents both a physical barrier and a visual barrier. The two sides of the street, there's a bit of a disconnect. So in our concepts, we proposed ideas that start to break down that kind of that grade level. Maybe there's a curbless condition, maybe the plaza isn't elevated That's not to say that a future scheme would not retain it. We are aware that there's a time capsule in the plaza. That is something that is very important to not disturb. So there'll be a lot of conversations about Freedom Plaza and what happens to it. We have heard from a lot of different groups that use it. I think the concept's really aimed to make it more comfortable. It's a place where you can probably fry an egg in August and you freeze in February. There's got to be, we're hoping to find a way to kind of make it more usable for everybody. But to that inlay is not necessarily protected historically, so yeah.
All right. Any question from this table?
But Jeff also up here.
This is always the bottom line. How much will it cost?
Right. $1 million question. So we have funding to take this through a real concept. These, again, are conversation starters. We've heard a lot from the public. We will be issuing an RFP next year for a consultant team that has engineering, transportation, economics, architecture, security, probably events programming, a really robust team to help us take this feedback, synthesize these ideas. NCPC will not be designing this. That synthesis will turn into a concept, potentially with 1 or 2 alternatives that will then go in through the NEPA process. So that takes about a year. And at that point, we can actually get a cost estimate. These concepts are really hard to ballpark because while urban capital is simply moving the curbs essentially and repainting, linear green would likely, with all the embedded infrastructure, would be similar to the ticket price for the new Champs-Élysées proposal to make that a green street. So we don't know yet. I would say once we get to the NEPA process, we'll be able to, and we are funded, we have enough money to get there, and then we'll have then we can do a cost estimate.
Okay.
So what are you funded for now for all the planning, and what would you estimate you've already spent?
We've spent a lot of staff time, NCPC staff time. We have just under 10 million to get us to hire a consultant to really bring these ideas into something realistic. That also includes some money to work with some of our programming partners. And I think we're also, we will be doing a survey of the avenue to understand what is underneath the avenue. There's a lot of limitations in terms of planting and digging, and there's a lot of infrastructure underneath, and we don't really know what is down there. That's also going to be impacting what we can do. So that is kind of, we're hashing out the final details there. That's already been funded, and we're hoping to kick that off soon.
All that to say is we are at the very beginning of the process, and the next iteration of the plan will be schematic design, which means we can understand the cost a little bit more. All right, for this table, no question? Kirby? No? All right, this table? All right.
Well, I'm Larry Feinberg, and I have 2 curmudgeonly critical questions. And one is, when I first came to Washington about 50 years ago, there was a mall on F Street. And they pretty much closed it down, and that was going to revitalize F Street, whatever. But it did exactly the opposite. It became a dead space and became a homeless hangout, a lot of it. And so I just am afraid that that's going to happen here again. And number 2 is about the homeless, and that's a consideration. And DuPont Circle right now has a big encampment of the homeless. What is it, down by 15th Street, there's another big encampment. And so, again, the way society is, for better or worse, I mean, what you may be doing is killing life and providing encampment space for homeless rather than, in fact, developing the city at all. And so I'm afraid of those things. And when would you respond to these concerns?
Yes, those are all extremely important concerns. Quick note on the funding we have to move forward first, though. That is actually remnants of the Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation funding. This is not a taxpayer-funded effort at this point. We also haven't been using that money. We've been just NCPC with our executive committee moving this work forward. In terms of the homeless, that is something that we're, the F Street Mall. So let's do that.
This sounds quite similar.
And there is,
Even a bigger scale, but it's quite similar. You wait with cars and make it pedestrians and have activities
okay.
in the mall, in the window, and you follow. So why wouldn't that happen now on a bigger scale, in the city, rather than revitalize?
There is a risk with any of these concepts, and again, these concepts, we're not moving forward, say, with Civic Stage entirely. We may move forward with something that has a promenade, but it will likely be a lot more nuanced. There is a risk that if we make a venue space without working with good programming partners, that it will feel largely empty, like the Avenue does today. We're working very closely with the BID and Events DC to kind of balance the daily experience with the Avenue with the kinds of events that they're hoping to bring. A lot of event producers say, I want to be on Pennsylvania Avenue. I want that backdrop. I want this stage. And the city is looking at it as a way to revitalize that area economically. We have a lot of businesses that have shut down. Maybe bringing some life here, even if it's for a weekend event, will help spur some revitalization. There is risk in all of this, and that's why we'll be doing another round of very robust studies, including projecting data into future trends. And that sounds really ambiguous, but we have great partners like the Council of Governments, who are very informed in terms of transit throughout the region, the BID and their economic development team, Events DC, the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development is on board, and we have great partners. We hope that will really make this a great place to be. That said, the homeless, we understand there's people living on the Avenue, particularly in the area of the Embassy of Canada. We have talked to the Embassy of Canada. We are working with the BID. NCPC does not have any kind of implementation authority. The jurisdiction of the Avenue is bizarre. The city owns the street. The Park Service owns the sidewalks. None of that is activity is permitted per Park Service guidelines. It's a very delicate conversation, and we really lean on our BID partners and Park Service partners to help find a good solution.
And if I can add to that, the working with the unhoused population is a very delicate issue. It's a systematic issue, and it's not just moving people and you find a solution, right? So the BID has a robust program that addresses the unhoused population. All right, moving to this table.
In your effort to revitalize Pennsylvania Avenue, it seems to me that you have a major problem that which you cannot solve. Active, fun streets have a lot of retail, and you'll never have retail on the south side of the avenue.
Correct. One thing we found well before the pandemic, through our work with HRNA to do that market study, is that the Avenue just does not have the characteristics to have retail. It will never be a Champs. It will never be city center. It will never. You can focus. We learned that you can focus retail on the north side at the cross streets. Those corners are the most successful spot for anything, but everything else is. It just doesn't work, largely because of Federal Triangle. There We don't know what will happen with the federal government in terms of their consolidation, in terms of telework. I don't know, and GSA doesn't know yet, like, what is the future of those buildings. They are blocked off, unengaging ground floors, gorgeous buildings, but not anything that really attracts people. The north side is a lot of empty lobbies. So we know that it won't be a good retail street. So that's sort of how we were looking at it as a venue. It really clears out after 5. The workforce leaves. On weekends, there are residents in the area. That's a pretty minimal percentage compared to other areas of the city. So why not use it to do more of what it does already successfully, which is host a fun run or the Pride Festival or some of these events that bring people together downtown. But yeah, retail is not in the future. We would love to, in this work, put in some bathrooms and some convenience areas for folks that, are making the trek from south of the mall up to downtown, make that area a little bit more accessible, but it won't be lined with shops.
And that's a great comment about retail. Just to make a comparison, so I used to work at Navy Yard, the Capital Riverfront area. That neighborhood has 15,000 residents today. That's like a small town, right? And it's 70% built out. So when it's 100% built out, they project Capital Riverfront to have 35,000 people living there. So when you compare that with the vibrancy of retail in the ballpark district, for example, how do that compare to what's happening in downtown? But that's not to say it's all bad news, right? You see a lot of the residential conversion, a lot of projects you read in the business journal. A lot of these property owners are thinking long term about how they want to position their asset for 10, 20 years from now. And that will be a catalyst to bring people downtown and will support the retail that we want. So.
My name is Richard Bush, and I'm a new member here at the Inhabitants. This is just an observation. Whatever you do, whether it's with trees or permanent artwork or temporary artwork, don't block the view of the Capitol.
No, that is sacred. It is the signature and the selling point. It's why everyone wants to make this a beautiful place. And I will say that any of this work will not only go through our commission, it will be fully vetted by the executive committee, and then also has to go through Commission of Fine Arts, which can be a very rigorous review. But that view shed is historically protected, so that will never be marred.
Okay, I see 2 hands here, and I think we're going to accept those. Lisa and the lady in red, orange, slightly colorful. And then I think we will move on. This has been an extraordinarily enlightening and lively discussion, as I knew it would be. I think we could probably go on for another hour or two, but we do want to finish up. And Nelson has some particularly useful, fun historical questions. So let's go on with our last 2 questions and then move towards the conclusion.
Hi, my name is Lisa Nickerson. My question is, having just a couple of times in my life experienced the Champs-Élysées, I think of this stretch of avenue as our comparison with the Champs-Élysées. And what makes that avenue in Paris so wonderful are the cafes and other facilities for tourists to sit in shady environs and eat and drink and enjoy themselves. I'm hoping that there's some thinking along those lines to in the green spaces that are going to be created to have those kinds of facilities, because tourists coming off the mall, they need a place to sit down and eat and drink or have a glass of wine. That would bring people, certainly bring people to that area. So is that in the picture at all?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, we're very conscious of the the back of house needs. We need public restrooms. We need places where folks can stop in and change a baby's diaper. We need trash cans. We need a lot of that, hopefully invisible stuff that really makes it a place where it's a respite. Again, as it is sort of that divider between the more vibrant downtown, F Street, E Street, and the mall with all the attractions, you need a stopping point, and that's the Avenue. While it won't have the retail presence of the shops, we are encouraged that restaurants may be a viable solution to some of those corners. We have had some great successful restaurants. Central has been there forever. Elephant and Castle is still going along. We are aiming, and again, NCPC can't dictate what goes where, but it would be great to see a diversity, some white tablecloth restaurants, some more stop-and-go places to really serve a diverse population of folks that would visit the Avenue. Also us that work there, too. You need a quick lunch spot. So seating in those public spaces, absolutely. One of the interesting things about both Urban Capital and Civic Stage is like you have some different viewpoints. If the sidewalks come a little bit further into the street, if that's eventually a concept, you could be sitting on an outdoor cafe with that amazing view of the Capitol. Same with Central Promenade idea. Maybe there's some kiosks in there. It's all on the table.
Like the one that used to be in Pershing Park.
Right. Yes, I do remember. I'm old enough to remember when the Park Service had kiosks on Penn Ave. The Park Service doesn't like to maintain them. And that program, I think you could buy flowers or newspapers, but wouldn't that be lovely to have some little vending there?
All right, last question.
Andrea Seeger again. And I come from the tourism industry, 35 years of it. So my question is, are you involving retail innovators and people from the tourism industry beyond the scope of Events DC? Are you getting hoteliers and destination management companies and those of us who actually run these shindigs all over the city, in every public space, in every museum, in every rentable location, the big drayage companies, the Freemans and those folks, are those people incorporated into your cachet of stakeholders? If they're not, they truly need to be, because they're the ones who are going to be running those events. Yes. They're the ones who know how to do it. They've been doing it for decades. And then just a couple of sideline comments. Bryant Park pops into my head with those beautiful little kiosks that they set up for the holidays. Curitiba in southern Brazil is a model transit system. It's been for about 40 years. And also a place like an Italy that they have in New York would be a really cool thing to have, because I think, we're all looking at this very personal, we live here, we drive here, we do our thing here. But we also need to consider that tourism, we need to also be tourist friendly and have places that cater to those who are passing through who want to get a beer and a sandwich somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. I will say that we did a flurry of meetings with event producers, Linder Global, Friedman. I can remember. It was probably like 12 briefings. It was so informative and so enlightening. We've done our own research into events in terms of mainly looking at Park Service permit data and kind of scoping out, doing a lot of field work, but really listening to them and hearing what their concerns are, what their needs are, has been pivotal. And I think that some sort of event producer consultant will be part of this RFP process going forward. There's no way we could do it without them. So they're absolutely a part of the team moving forward.
The economic development piece, or I should say economic revitalization, would be foundational moving forward. We met with the leadership of Federal City Council and Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership to talk about and brainstorm ideas. So that's a great comment.
And it's a revenue producer. And it, it helps the food and beverage industry. It helps the tourism industry overall. And those people come to the game with their Rolodexes. They have clients that they can sell that space to that generates activity, that generates revenue for the city.
Yeah, when COVID hit in 2020, and I was with Navy Yard at the time, we did impact analysis of the revenue lost of that entertainment, retail, visitor spending, tourism, and we quantify that. So we can do the same thing with Pennsylvania Avenue and project it forward. So that's why the consulting team that Karin talked about, I will be the biggest lobby for the best in class economic development team working on this project. So thank you.
Yeah. And I will, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, it is on. Thank you for coming today. I'd just like to mention to those of us who are worried about life on Pennsylvania Avenue, who here remembers when the District of Columbia government allowed Basson's to open the first sidewalk cafe in the city of Washington on Pennsylvania Avenue at, what was it, about 14th Street, 15th? 14th. So we've come a long way since then, and we may have a long way to go yet, but we're getting there slowly and surely. I'm now going to turn the floor over to our historian, Nelson Reimagining, who has given us some interesting questions. And I also, has that been mentioned already? No. Yeah. You will see at your tables a rather nice little NCPC field notes booklet that has facts and figures, and also you can use for notes. So look for those on your tables. And Nelson, take it away.
Okay, we'll start with a couple of trivia questions. The only rules are if you've won one of these prizes, please defer maybe to somebody who hasn't. But if you win again, that's fine too. Last meeting, I concentrated on first ladies who came out in favor of voting rights for the District of Columbia and worked very hard to get us voting rights, various kinds, and an elected local government. Two questions I have today on what presidents in the 20th century did the most for our voting rights. The first one, in his State of the Union address, asked Congress to pass a resolution to amend the Constitution to allow us to vote for president and be represented in the House of Representatives as though we were a state. He was only able in his 2 terms to get the provision through for electing for president, which we have been doing since 1964. He wasn't able to get the vote for the House of Representatives through, although he tried vigorously. And Vice President Nixon and a senator from Connecticut, Prescott Bush, got it through the Senate twice, but couldn't get it through the House. Name the president who got us to vote for president. I heard Eisenhower over here. Okay. Did you win before?
He was Nixon's president. You gave it away.
I did? Uh-oh. Oh, okay. Well, I figured I'd have to give other clues too, but I didn't have to. Okay. Second one is, maybe you'll know this one too right off the bat. Name the president a few years later who got us the delegate vote through in his first State of the Union message again and elected local government and a mayor, locally elected mayor. Nixon, you've got it. Okay, they're the two. I also have two trivia questions for our guests, which I'll get to in a minute. They get the first crack at these two. It's one actually. I did want to mention that while we're on this subject of Pennsylvania Avenue and all of this. The Eleanor Holmes Norton, as you know, is our delegate. She has a bill in to essentially do away with the Commission of Fine Arts. I don't know if any of you know that. And the involvement that it's involved in the aesthetics of the city and in some neighborhoods. There's the old Georgetown Act, for example. She has a bill in to essentially do away with the Commission of Fine Arts. She said she is drafting a bill to almost do away with all of the federal involvement in local planning and turn that all over to the local government. And 3, she said it's time to really consider turning over the building height regulations that are imposed by Congress to the local government as well. And she's saying this that, home rule, we can't get statehood through, but we can get elements of statehood through first by legislation. So that's where she's going. And so the Committee of 100, this organization and others should be apprised of this, what's going on, and be alert, please. In the meantime, of course, I'm running against Eleanor. If you have any ideas how I can bring this up, let me know. Let me know. Okay, my question is, it involves Pennsylvania Avenue, and this is 1928, when the federal officials came up with a plan to change the architecture and sites of buildings on Pennsylvania Avenue. And one of the recommendations was to demolish the district building. They said it was the wrong site for the building, and its architecture just wasn't right. How about it? Well, the local people rose up in arms and wrote letters to Congress, particularly to the Committee on Appropriations, which had in its bill the money to demolish the district building. And its chairman was from Connecticut, and when the bill came up, appropriations bill, he said, I've received over 1,000 letters from citizens of the District of Columbia. And I was particularly moved by letters written by students from the D.C. public schools saying, don't allow this building to be demolished. It's our city hall. And he said, so I'm going to move that this be stricken, the appropriation from the bill, to demolish the district building. Do I hear any objection? Well, he didn't hear any objection, so moved, and it went on to the full Senate and House, and we still have the district building. It was almost demolished in 1928. And so that's how things happen here sometimes. Just a little note on the side, Hiram Bingham was a senator who moved this, a Republican from Connecticut. Does anybody know what other interesting things Senator Bingham did? There you go, Ashu Pishu, yes. He had been a professor of archaeology of South America before he became a senator. And so that was my question. Well, I gave it away. Name the building that was almost demolished in 1928. The district building. You win.
Nelson, why don't you name another building on the south side of the avenue that was almost demolished in a more recent Pennsylvania Avenue redevelopment scheme? That's fine.
What one? On south side?
Another building on the south side of the avenue, which was also proposed to be demolished with only a little bit left over symbolically by the plan in the early 60s. Well, okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming today. Another one of our lively meetings. Come next month on October 17th. Yes, October 17th, and we'll be hearing about the NAACP in Washington, D.C. It will be an interesting program, so please make plans to join us. And it will be also highlighted in the next edition of your newsletter. And I hope you're all very pleased with our revamped newsletter. John Edwards, one of our board members, has taken over the custodianship and editorship, and it is filled with news. It is lively, and online in our website, it is in color. So go to the AOI of DC website and see that, and wait for your black and white version to come through the mail and come to our meeting next month. Thank you all for attending. Thanks to Jeff and to Kim for joining us today.